Russ, are you aware that there's an award show for the best podcast?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Do you know what the awards are called?
The Potties?
Well, you're close. That's a good guess. The Webbies.
The Webbies.
Yeah. It's like horrible. I don't think I would want a Webby. You know, I mean, I guess it'd be an honor to win a podcasting award, which, by the way, we're in no danger of doing, so no problem there. But I don't know if I'd want a Webby on my shelf. I don't know. Can't they call it something else?
They should have just called it The Pod or something.
Yeah, The Pod or something, yeah. I don't know.
Pod Gods.
Yeah, make it a little statuette like an iPod Classic or something like that
Right.
with the dial on it, you know, just kind of like for old times. That's what I would do.
Now, do they have various categories in there? Or?
They do, yeah.
Okay.
I haven't watched it, but they do have
Right.
different categories, you know, different types of podcasts. I don't know.
Right.
Things like that. And then there are personalities and all that sort of thing. Just because they're called the Webbies, it kind of put me off. I don't think I could go up to someone and say, I want a Webby. You know, I guess I'd put it on my resume, though. But
Sounds a bit like Wedgie or something, doesn't it?
yeah, like I got a wedgie or something, you know. You wouldn't be happy about that.
No, not at all.
I feel like I'd be just as happy with a Webby as I would with a wedgie.
I guess if we ever rise to that level of consideration, we can worry about it at that point.
Yeah.
But until then, we'll just keep talking about music.
Yeah, that's what we do anyway, so here we go.
Here at Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. This week is episode 164. I'm your co-host, Russ.
And I'm your co-host, Mike, with the stuffed up nose. So I'm sorry that I'm going to sound a little strange in this really fantastic podcast that we've got set up. I'm a little disappointed I'm not going to be able to deliver the goods in my usual mellifluous way.
Maybe things will improve as we go along. Well, I know something that might get that nose cleared up right away, Mike.
Oh, what's coming?
We've got a special theme tonight. We're going to revisit one of our most popular topics, and I'm going to help set the scene here. Are you ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Put on your apron.
Should I get the dough ready?
Watch out for the sauce. Here it comes. Oh.
You know, security really should have checked that hollow mandolin body before allowing it into the room.
Now we've got sauce all over everything.
Yeah.
It's Italian Explosion Part 2.
Part 2.
That's right. All the music tonight, Italian composers, Italian jazz. It's all Italian.
It's all Italian. And here's the strange thing. We could have easily made this 2 or 3 episodes straight because a load of recordings of Italian music came out in both classical and jazz in the last 2 weeks. It's like I've never seen anything like this.
It's a real explosion of recordings. I've never seen this many at once.
So an appropriately named podcast episode.
Yeah.
Another thing that's happened too is a lot of, in classical music, a lot of women composers' albums have come out all of a sudden too. And they all look pretty interesting the way they're put together and stuff. So I'll be digging into them one at a time. I don't think we'll do a full episode on them, but we'll see.
All right.
We got one tonight, in fact. So
Well, I can't wait to get into this Italian program here. But before we do, I want to remind all of our listeners that in the episode description, you can find links to Spotify and Apple Music for all the music that we'll discuss. And at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. You can listen to the podcast there as well if you want to get everything in one place. Now, if you can't see the full description or the recording list or the links are difficult to find or navigate on your app, please check us out on our host site, Podbean. That's podbean.com, where everything is easy to follow. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe wherever you listen to us. Tell a music-loving friend. Help us grow our audience. If you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a short review, that helps us get listed in the music category recommendations, another way that we can get new listeners. And come over and follow us on our Facebook page to get extra info and more new releases throughout the week. See our handsome faces and interaction with the artists. You can leave a message or comment there as well. And if you'd like to contact us directly with any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. We want to recommend our friends AJ and Johnny over at the Same Difference 2 Jazz Fans 1 Jazz Standard podcast as well. where they look at several versions of a jazz standard in each episode. They play little cuts and samples from each version, discuss the history, talk about what they like and don't like, and generally have a lot of humor mixed in with your history over there. They come out every 2 weeks, and there's a link to their podcast in the description. And if you stick around to the end of this episode, you can also check out an audio promo from them. And we're also going to be playing a lot of samples tonight.
We sure are. Well, we're not going to have as many as you think. I kind of cut back a little bit here, but not that much, I guess.
To give you an idea of what all this great Italian music sounds like, so here's our fair use disclaimer. Music sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available on streaming services in the links provided. And we also suggest that if you enjoy the music, you consider purchasing the CDs or high-quality downloads to support the artists.
All right, there's no real news this week, so let's just leap right in. Our first classical recording is going to be Italian women composers. Two of them, in fact. One of them, unknown to me, that would be Maddalena Casulana, who lived during the late Renaissance, and Barbara Strozzi, who's fairly well known by now. Her music was sort of, how would I say, rediscovered, reactivated in around, I guess, the 1990s, and it has steadily gained ground. They're really great works. She lived in the Baroque era, the early Baroque, when, Italian Baroque music was really the happening form, really. This album is called The Excellence of Women, and this is by the Fieri Consort. I'd like to name them individually. I'll mention them a little bit during the track listing. They are Lucinda Cox, soprano, Hannah Eli, soprano, Sarah Ann Champion, mezzo-soprano, Lucy Goddard, mezzo-soprano, Josh Cooter, tenor, Tom Kelly, tenor, Ben Rowarth, bass baritone, and then we have the instrumentalists Harry Buckoak, viola da gamba, Toby Carr, lute, Eileen Henry, baroque harp, who gets a lot of time on this album, by the way, so if you like the baroque harp, you're in for a treat, and Christina Watt, lute. And this is on Fieri Records. I guess they put this all together by themselves. Came out on May 3rd. They were really quick to respond to us, too. They were kind enough to send us a booklet so that we could follow the texts and understand what we were listening to. And I have to say, I still didn't really understand what I was hearing in some of these texts. There are these kind of convoluted Italian texts about love and how the person their heart is shattered because their loved one isn't there or something like that, even though everything is great. I don't know. The Italians like to suffer because of love. What can we say? Yeah, Italians think they deserve love, and they're just, shattered when the person isn't there. Germans are just upset in German lieder because the person left them, and they're all brooding now. So that's really the big difference. Anyway, this album title, The Excellence of Women, comes from an essay by Lucrezia Marinella, published in 1600, called The Nobility and Excellence of Women and the Defects and Vices of Men. I'm pretty sure that many of my ex-girlfriends have read this book. It was a response to the misogynist diatribe that circulated widely at the end of the 16th century. I'm not sure what they're talking about there, but I guess it means just in society. It wasn't a specific book. It's just people saying, oh, women are terrible or something like that. So she wrote this book about that. Casulana's 1588 book of four-voice madrigals matches Marinella's title in tone. She wrote, I want to show, this is Casulana, the composer, writing now, I want to show the world, to the degree that it's granted to me in this profession of music, the foolish error of men who so greatly believe themselves the masters of high intellectual gifts, which it seems to them cannot be equally common among women. And Barbara Strozzi, born in Venice, in her Opus 1 duet, shows some Scriabin-like hubris when she declares she would perhaps be called a new Sappho. Some people have really high opinions of themselves. Although Strozzi deserved to have a high opinion of herself. She was a very good composer, but still, I think a little humility is called for. Even so, it just makes you more appealing. Anyway, Casulana was probably born in Casole d'Elsa, near Siena, which is near Florence, in turn. She's the first female composer to have had a whole book of her music printed and published in the history of Western music. And that happened in the Renaissance, so that's pretty impressive. Yeah. That's early, okay? Things weren't really printed much before that, unless they were like medieval church works or something like that. Casulana's legacy has up to now rested on a single complete book of madrigals, her second four-voice book of 1570, and two incomplete books, the first four-voice book of 1568 and her only five-voice book of 1583. She uses a lot of chromatic twists and rich dissonances, aligning herself with the avant-garde as a result of the time. And it's not going to sound avant-garde to our ears, but at that time it would have. A full evaluation of Casulana's style and compositional range was hampered by the loss of the alto part book of her 5-voice book. That's the last one. But in October 2021, Laurie Strass, the writer of the booklet note, who I'm quoting liberally here, or at least paraphrasing, found the missing alto in a Russian library. This is pretty exciting.
Wow.
Like they say, like, you know, Eine kleine Nachtmusik by Mozart's missing a movement. And like, you imagine being in some library somewhere and like you find it. That'd be awesome. You know, we finally hear what it sounds like. And also there were 2 previously uncatalogued part books. Strass is also the translator of the texts in the booklet and is director of the Musica Secreta, an ensemble that researches and performs music written for and by women in the Renaissance. Okay, now this album is very heavy on Casulana's works. They're the new discovery, really, with Strozzi coming in for some contrast occasionally. So the first 2 works are both by Maddalena Casulana. The first one is called Come Fiammeggia e Splende. It's a pretty typical title, really, in Italian, how it flames and glows, I guess. This sounds like a full vocal ensemble here. We hear the whole ensemble together right away. And the melody has a nice bounce to it, so there's some rhythm to it. It's well articulated from the ensemble, and the phrasing comes across with an Italian sense of melody from that era. If you know those great early Italian Baroque, like operas and things like that, there's a lot of that quality in this. The clarity of the recording, too, is magnificent. The individual voices and the harmony all stand out, and the ensemble has a light glow to its vocal quality. I really enjoyed this. Let's hear it. Well, not the whole thing. Let's hear the beginning. Yeah, really appealing. I mean, right away, I like the lightness of the vocal attack. They don't really lay it on. They're a bit restrained. It just sounds great. Really appealing first track here, so I was really engaged right away. Track 2, Casulana again, Aura. Now, this is actually, they label all 4 verses of this song here. I'll just say the first one, Aura che mormorando al bosco, wind that is murmuring in the woods. It's a multi-part text. It's set via grand harmonic architecture, features chromaticism over a much broader scale. It sounds complex in the interweaving of different lines. Each verse is set like it's a completely different work, and there's a freshness to the singing that's making me look forward to the rest of this recording. Really, that started in the first track. I'd like to tell you the subject of the text, but I'm not sure how to summarize it. I'm going to give it a shot here, though. I guess you could say it praises the sun, despite the title, which is about a breeze. As for examples, it's hard to pick a spot to sample and say, this is what the piece sounds like. So I'm going to say, go to your favorite streaming platform and hear this one for yourself. It's really worthwhile. Meanwhile, track 3 is Barbara Strozzi, so we get to hear her for the first time. Godere in gioventù. We move here to the Baroque. The text exhorts young women to open their breasts to joy. Not their hearts, their breasts. That's the words, that they use in the text. It's got a bounce to it, too, and contrasting sections, as was common in the early period of the Baroque. I'm going to go in a little bit to sample this one. We're going to start this from about a minute in. Yeah, those little shakes in there just really bring out a lot of emotion. I really enjoy that. Strozzi achieves a contrast by rhythmic changes, as you heard, and changes of harmony ensemble, and she does this often. This is one of her big techniques. It's very creative composing. Track 4, back to Casulana, Caro dolce mio amore. First line is stated in block harmony and sounds pretty traditional. There are Monteverdian elements in it, and I want to state how well Casulana sets the Italian language, and she's doing this in the days before the Baroque found a technique through opera. It was really Monteverdi in Orfeo who kind of established how the Italian language was going to be set to music, with the accents being accented in the music as well. Track 5, Casulana, Tu mi dicesti amore. Another traditional sounding madrigal, this time with the voices in scattered harmony. When I say scattered, I mean they're not in block harmony, they're not lined up, they're just kind of being at different times. Again, clearly captured on the recording, each voice sounds fantastic. Track 6, Casulana, Se voi siete. It's an instrumental. This is a solo for the Baroque harp, played by Eileen Henry, but there are words printed in the booklet, so I'm guessing this is the instrumental melody of an actual song. Let's sample this because we get to hear some of the accompaniment, the excellence of the players there. Yeah, when I hear things like that, I think, yeah, I could have lived back then. I like the really gentle kind of quality of the instrument and the pacing. Gentleness is not something that the 21st century does well. This is one of the things that keeps me listening to classical music, I think. Track 7, Barbara Strozzi, Il contrasto di cinque sensi, so the contrast of the five senses. This moves in a rather odd dotted rhythm at the beginning. In the text, the five senses argue over which is the chief provider of joy. This makes for some interesting vocal contrasts, with some of the voices given solo spots. It seems like the kiss, which is a combination of senses, brings the most joy, according to this text. As far as I can make out, it's kind of complicated. Going on to track 8, Casulana, Come essere puote amore. There's a nice warmth to the opening chords, followed by a more polyphonic setting. There's no continuo on this track. It's a straight vocal madrigal, and I'm going to sample this as well. When we hear that, we're hearing really what was very modern at the time. The madrigal was really sort of pushing music forward. Okay, next is Casulana, Datemi pace, give me peace. And we hear mezzo Sara and champion solo here, and she brings a different tone to different sections of the text. The accompaniment is lute and baroque harp, played by Toby Carr and Eileen Henry, respectively. I think I should sample the individual voices, because they're really beautiful individually as well. So let's hear a little bit of Sarah Ann Champion. I've got to get out of that because it's a pretty short song and it's really almost over. Anyway, next. Track 10, Casulana, O notte, o cielo, o mare, o piagge, o monti. These are all just sort of nature elements. Capriano uses the opening of Cipriano de Rores, O sonno, for this work, thereby hinting that she's his disciple according to the notes. It's a solo for soprano Hannah Eli, accompanied by only viola da gamba, played by Harry Bukoke. I love spare settings like this, and Eli's voice is very pleasant to listen to. Let's hear her. Again, a short tune that if I play more, it'll end. Barbara Strozzi, track 11, Moralità Amorosa. This features soprano Lucinda Cox as the soloist, with 3 instrumental accompanists on baroque harp, Eileen Henry, lute, Toby Carr, and viola da gamba, Henry Bukoke. This has a gorgeous melismatic opening, and I like Cox's vocals here. She's got a hint of early Emma Kirkby's timbre in her tone, that real pureness of sound. And the accompanists provide varied timbre in the back. This has that early Italian Baroque sound that I love so much. Let's sample this. This is one of my favorite tracks on the album, in fact. That was a long sample. I was waiting for that cadence to come. This is a pretty long track, actually, at 4 minutes, and I like the way the rhythm changes with each verse, as does the accompaniment. That's the Fieri's doing, the accompanimental changes. It's a gorgeous arrangement and performance of a gorgeous song, so worth sampling in its entirety. Track 11. Track 12, we're back to Maddalena Casulana's Dolci e Vaghi Augelletti. Full block harmony starts this, and it's rather startling after the dancing of the previous Strozzi piece. Well, it started dancing later. I didn't sample that part. The sound is heavier, and the theme is indeed heavier. It's one of those typical Italian Baroque texts where the woman has left the man and he is suffering in her absence. The approach here is a bit different. It's on the slow side, with the ensemble taking care to have the words register. This entire album is easy to follow textually due to the clarity of the recording. And I also want to point out the beautiful halo of room sound that was surrounded Lucinda Cox's voice in the previous track. So this is a fantastic recording. Track 13, Casulana o Messager de miei pensieri. Here the harmony is scattered, meaning these syllables aren't sung together but sound more independent. Casulana really does prefigure the Baroque in a way. The writing here is reminiscent of Monteverdi. Track 14, Casulana Bella d'amor guerriera. This song rather happily praises the beautiful warrior of love. It's upbeat in rhythm, and the phrasing of certain syllables is very appealing. Let's get a little taste of this. Track 15, Barbara Strozzi, Le tre grazie a Venere. A multi-voice composition with voices coming in independently. It's sung by all women's voices, 3 of them, with the mezzo Sarah Ann Champion anchoring the harmony in the lowest voice. Strozzi varies the settings of each verse, and that makes this work, as well as the others, appealing throughout. Track 16, Casulana, Hai dispietato amor, you have disrespected love. Mixed choir here, a cappella, and sometimes the high and low ends are separated, sometimes mixed, and the voices always come in beguiling combinations. Track 17, Casulana, Perché al viso d'amor portava insegna, starts with a soft attack. I really appreciate the variety of approaches the Fieri bring to the music. The voices are all fairly independent in their melodies in this madrigal, and again, the recording makes this track register beautifully. Some beautiful harmonies occur too. I like the sudden change at about the minute and 20-second mark. It's a chord change. I'm going to start this at the 1 minute mark, and you'll hear that if you follow. It's about 20 seconds from where I start the recording. Yeah, very playful. I really like the play of the voices in that one. Track 18, Casulana, Tu sei clitia il sol mio. It's got a pretty accompaniment in the viola da gamba and harp, and it's fairly brief. The voices are all women. Track 19, Barbara Strozzi, Donne Belle, Beautiful Women. This is a solo vocal for soprano Hannah Eli with full accompaniment. It's a beautiful song with Strozzi's trademark changes of rhythmic shape between verses. The message is that suffering from love is folly, and that the remedy of love is inconstancy, which I think in modern terms, I guess, would mean playing the field is the cure for love. This song clocks in at about 6 minutes, one of the longest on the album, but it's full of appealing ideas, so no worries, and I would like to sample the opening of this one. Track 20, Casulana, Facemi quanto vol fortuna ria. A cappella mixed choir here. The individual voices are expressive and can be heard clearly. I like what each singer brings to his or her part. They're all very individual in their tones and their approaches to the line. 21, Casulana, Be veggio di lontano il dolce lume. A sweetly taken opening followed up by the men's voices in the lower range, and the piece weaves through the vocal text. I can't really summarize the text, even though it's 6 lines. It seems the poet is satisfied by his current lover, but he sighs for someone else. Track 22, Casulana, Se dall'ardente umore. The initial entries here caught my ear, reminding me a bit of a Renaissance mass style. See if you agree. I'm going to sample the opening. I like the way the middle voices at the beginning set a steady tone for the higher voices to step out onto. Textures change throughout, echoing the feeling of the text. I like the way the male voices will sometimes drop out, leaving the women's voices suspended in midair. A nice effect. Track 23, Casulana, Morte, che vuoi? Death, what do you want? This is set as a conversation between a singer and death, with Lucinda Cox as the questioner, and Sarah Ann Champion, the mezzo-soprano, the lower voice, as death. Eileen Henry accompanies on Baroque harp. It's got a harsher edge to it than at least the previous track. Track 24, Casulana, Ben Venga il Pastor Mio, and then there's a second verse as well. This is in two parts featuring Hannah Eli, the soprano, and tenor Tom Kelly. We never hear the men's voices solo on this, but we do have a duet here. Toby Carr accompanies on the lute, but in a light, harp-like way. Eli steps out with some gorgeous notes while Carr remains discreet in the lower voice. Track 25, Strozzi, La Quaglia Sonetto Burlesco. This is the last of the Strozzi works on the album. Here, Hannah Eli duets with bass baritone Ben Rowarth. It's a dramatic setting, particularly in the women's voice. The setting is rather playful. It's dramatic and playful, with the two voices often conversing or commenting on each other, and it's well played here. Track 26, Casulana, Occhi Vaghi e Lucenti. Most of the ensemble is heard here. The work is cheerful and bright sounding, with the voices blending beautifully. Of course, another suffering lover, despite the brightness of the madrigal. Track 27, Casulana Come Esser, and this is an instrumental. And the words are printed in the booklet for this, but we don't hear them. We get a final chance to hear the instrumentalist, and this features the viola da gamba in the lead, played by Henry Bucoque, Toby Carr on lute, and Eileen Henry on baroque harp. The piece is elegant and beautifully paced. And finally, track 28, Casulana Ovunque Volgi il Piede. It has two verses, and it's a song of praise for the lover. It's a calm madrigal. Much of it moves in block harmony, but the voices do enter in scattered fashion at times. It's a fine piece to end the album with, leaving us feeling good. So this is a beautifully executed and recorded program of very appealing music from the late Renaissance and early Baroque. The performances are uniformly amazing all the way through, with great clarity produced and captured on every track. The Italian style of the period is well caught in the performances as well. Through their varying use of continuo instruments, the Fieri Ensemble keep the ear engaged as the sound of each track differs, while the style more or less remains the same. The inclusion of works by Barbara Strozzi takes us away from the Renaissance for intervals, but this recording belongs mostly to Casulana, who provides the lion's share of the works on the program and occasionally hints at the Baroque in her settings. It's a quiet, almost meditative album, ideal for late-night listening. I found its overall sound soothing, and the Casulana works are a great discovery. And I also want to give a shout-out to the sound engineer, David Hinnett, and the producer, Adrian Peacock. They've really produced something wonderful here.
It's a very beautiful sounding recording. The vocal performances are fine, and the parts are so well balanced you can hear everything. In comparison, I found the instrumental parts are really subtle. I had to tune my ear in to hear what was going on underneath a lot, but they always support the vocals. I really enjoy the harmonic movement and cadences of the Renaissance music, especially the pieces that sort of tend more toward minor tonalities. And I'm always intrigued at the surprising changes in harmony that come out in the works, and I enjoyed listening to them. It is kind of long, or rather, I should say, it has lots of tracks, so you may want to break this up just so that you make sure you hold your attention to all the changes that are going on as it goes through, because there's a lot of different types of works. And then, like you said, when you have the Baroque works that sort of break it up a little bit, it may be hard to focus your attention all in one listening. And so I did that, and I came back with kind of renewed energy so I could figure out what was going on right to the end. But I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I did that too. I heard this, I think, in 3 listens. You could easily just put this on in the background and it'll just pleasantly play all the way through. But if you really want to pay attention to it, I would say, break it up a little bit. It's a 75-minute recording of rather brief, tracks in a foreign language too. So it takes some energy if you're going to really do a close listening to it. All right, moving on to our second of our Italian explosion albums for today. We have cello and piano works by 4 Italian composers. They are Alfredo Casella, Giuseppe Mulè, Ottorino Respighi, and Ildebrando Pizzetti. Now, you probably know Respighi's name from that list. The other maybe Pizzetti. He's kind of come out a little bit. And Casella's been well served, too, on CD, although still many people don't know his name. The performers are Roberto Trainini on the cello and Stella alla Luce Pontoriero on the piano. Boy, what a beautiful name that is. This is on the Tactus Records label, and it was released on May 3rd. There's no track listing in the Tactus booklet. It's apparently printed on the back of the CD. So I had to go to another website to track it down because we're listening to this on Deezer. And Deezer, for some reason, annoyingly, doesn't list the composers on their track list. I realize that other sites like Apple and Spotify do. I don't understand why Deezer does that.
Yeah, get your metadata going there, Deezer.
Yeah. It also doesn't list which artist plays which instrument in the booklet, though that's easy to figure out by the photo because the man's got the cello, and that's Roberto Trainini. Just a note, I think the CD booklet should always print the track listing in case the CD case goes missing. A lot of people like to keep their CDs in folders.
Right.
And they keep the booklets and they throw the jewel case and the back insert away. Not me. I keep everything. But I just want to point that out to the people at Tactus in case they're listening. Anyway, all right, this was a little misleading too. I'm not really sure what it says on the CD case, but the first 3 tracks are Alfredo Casella's Sonata per violoncello e pianoforte, so sonata for cello and piano, Opus 8. It's a 3-movement work. Now, I got my track listing from Presto Records in England, and they have tracks 1 and 2 as the sonata, and then the third they just called Allegro ma non troppo, like it's an independent work. It's not, okay? It's a 3-movement work. Anyway, the first movement, Allegro assai. There's an echo of the opening of Brahms' Sextet for Strings, Opus 36 at the beginning, and we get a pretty mysterious opening with a piano ostinato and a dug-in cello line. We also get what I think is a quote from Brahms' first piano concerto, too. Let's listen, see if you can pull these things out. I'm a big Brahms fan, so I heard all these things right away. Here we go. Kind of want to keep going now because it's really starting to move. Anyway, sound is excellent on the recording, on the dry side, but up close with excellent clarity. The cello's line is like a through melody, constantly playing legato. For the second theme, at 1 minute and 32 seconds, it's more lyrical and even soars at times. At 2 minutes and 16 seconds, the cadence is only suggested and extra closing material is added. The movement slows at 2 minutes and 42 seconds, ushering in a new section via the piano. In the development, at 4 minutes and 26 seconds onward, much play is made of that familiar 3-accented note motif from the opening that I think is from Brahms' first piano concerto. I think it's a quote of that or a suggestion of it. The piano has a lot of presence in this work. It's also constantly playing. The cello line from 5 minutes is also reminiscent of other works of the period. By 5 minutes and 57 seconds, this section ends in a brief silence, and a new section arises with the cello theme. It ends with a big cadence and sudden halo-like room ambience. And I'm wondering if that was added at the end. I liked the dry sound, that suddenly there's sort of room sound at the end. Anyway, it doesn't disturb the performance at all. It's really good. By the way, I want to say, when you hear busy piano like this accompanying a solo instrument, that's really hard to do because if you get the piano rumbling, it's a very loud instrument. And the cello, string instruments can only go so loud, especially violins. They're a lot quieter than a cello. But you really have to be careful to not obscure the cello's line. And when you've got like really busy passages like this, that's really hard to do. So good accompanying here. Or I shouldn't say accompanying, but good piano playing here by Stella alla Luce, Pontoriero. I just wanted to say that name again. Second movement, Adagio. This begins with a ponderous, spacious piano line. The cello comes in with a heavy, anguished melodic line. At the 3rd minute, we hear a more contrite, lyrical theme in the cello, and that's the theme that I'm going to sample here. Those piano lines make this sound voluptuous. Really nice. So the work slowly gets riled up, as you heard, and it sinks into a lower range and rises up to a higher range by the 4th minute. At 4:25, there's a pause, and the piano picks up with a tolling set of chords and rumbling repeated notes in the bass. I noticed that Casella separates sections very clearly, clearing the musical field with silence, and then starting again. It's rather an unusual approach. The cello's deep tone in its lower end here is very satisfying. By 6 minutes and 14 seconds, we're hearing the piano in its high end, and with considerably more room reverb. It kind of sounds like the microphone did a camera-like zoom out there. This leads me to believe that this movement was recorded at 2 different times. I'm not really sure. Or the extra sound was added. This is the only work that this happens on, by the way, on this album. I'm just curious about it. The background ambience seems to change. It doesn't disturb the musical flow or performance, though. Everything is clearly recorded. There's another pause, and the cello is back in contrite mode at the 8-minute mark, playing beautifully in its low end. The movement ends in this quiet, resigned manner. Track 3 is movement 3, Allegro ma non troppo. This begins with an ostinato piano bass that builds to a rumble. It's rather loud, and the cello comes in with its theme. A more lyrical cello theme emerges from the quiet at 1 minute and 21 seconds, and I really love Trainini's quiet playing, and I'm going to sample that part. This is from about the 1 minute and 21 second mark of this 3rd movement. I really love those deep pizzicati in the cello once the piano takes over. A more march-like rhythm follows, and the cello plays a theme that drives the music via sequencing into new harmony. This gets broken up by rumbling chaos in the piano, which comes back to an ostinato bass, and we hear the opening theme in the 4th minute. Another section ending followed by a pause at 6 minutes, then a lyrical winding cello theme that's rather attractive follows. The piano even gets a lovely version of the theme at 6 minutes and 14 seconds, after which the music builds up to a final sprint to the final chord. Track 4, Giuseppe Mulè, who was born in Termini Imerese, which is a town in Palermo in Sicily. In 1885, he died in Rome in 1961. This is his Largo for violoncello e pianoforte from 1903. The notes describe this as a little jewel of clear-cut Italian operatic style. Mulè wrote this in Palermo for the wedding of his brother. The piano starts with a sweet melody accompanied by repeating quarter-note chords. The cello comes in melodically with long singing legato phrases similar in mood to Saint-Saëns' The Swan. The piano accompaniment remains spacious throughout. There's a slow crescendo to the 2nd minute to a quieter climax at the 3-minute mark. Then a repeat of the opening melody, and I'm going to sample it from there. I bet that made the bride cry. It's a very straightforward and beautiful work. Tracks 5 through 6, we're back to Alfredo Casella again. Notturno e Tarantella for cello and piano, Opus 54. Materials for this work were written in 1929 onwards, and the transcription for cello and piano we hear here was made by Luigi Silva in 1931. The final version was for cello and orchestra, written in 1934. By this time, Casella was in a neoclassic idiom, different from the more romantic sonata we heard first on the album. So track 5 is the Notturno. It starts with unison piano harmony. The cello plays the legato melody when it enters. Casella speeds up the cello line at 1 minute and 30 seconds, increasing tension. The piano pushes it even further when it gets a solo moment. There's a big climax at 2 minutes and 2 seconds, after which the music dies down, and by the 3-minute mark returns to its opening theme, now played at a slightly faster tempo. The quiet ending is lovely. Though this has more of the shape of a classical work, it's still got romantic voluptuousness of sound. The tarantella, an example of which we heard before the explosion at the beginning of this podcast, is brief at 1 minute and 47 seconds. This is very different than that one, though. Let's hear this from the beginning. Yeah, we build up there to something really exciting. The pace is excitable, and the cellist gets some chances to show off his bowing skills. It's an appealing piece with some attractive harmonic turns. Track 7, a piece that I didn't know before, and I'm now glad I've discovered. Ottorino Respighi. We know him for his orchestral suites.
Yeah.
But here we have him for cello and piano, Adagio con variazioni, so an Adagio theme, and variations on that. Opus 133. In 1902, this piece was conceived as a slow movement of an unpublished concerto for cello and orchestra. The concerto, I believe, was published in 1922 and also in a version for cello and piano. We can hear some of Respighi's impressionistic, descriptive style. The theme is derived from folk music and reconnects Respighi to his Bolognese origins. First we hear the theme, which is rather downcast in the cello, with wandering lines in the piano. Variations are gone into smoothly without interrupting from the previous variation. The shape of the music will just change, giving the feeling that the work is through composed. We think of Respighi as being an excellent orchestrator, and he comes up with appealing timbral combinations in these variations, with the piano going into different registers and patterns, like arpeggios, chords, things like that, while the cello will sometimes take the accompanimental role by playing repeated arpeggiated patterns. Most of the variations are lyrical, and some feature intriguing pattern combinations. There's a pretty variation toward the end that I'll sample. This is from about the 10 minute and 20 second mark. Yeah, really beautiful. And it's like that all the way through. I can't really capture the whole beauty of this work in one sample, so you'll have to hear it on your own. It has a solid rock-like ending that's very satisfying, too. The last three tracks are all Ildebrando Pizzetti's Tre Canti for cello and piano. It means 3 songs. They're from 1924, and they're wordless songs, of course, with the cello playing the melody. The first movement, Affettuoso, track 8, is well named. Affettuoso is exactly what it sounds like. This starts with a soft, brushed-out sound on the cello and a gentle piano accompaniment. The melody has some appealing curves as well. I think you'll fall for this right away. Let's hear a sample of it. And a nice change over to a new theme right there where I just started fading out. Pizzetti is thinking of words when setting the cello line, but we don't know what they are. The movement remains spacious throughout, picks up a light dramatic edge via a crescendo in the middle. The drama is interrupted, then suddenly launched into again. Once the drama dissipates, we hear the opening theme played lightly again. It's very appealing. Track 9, Quasi Grave e Commosso, has a gentle opening but with fuller cello tone this time. The piano accompanies softly and sparingly. At 1 minute and 46 seconds, a brighter, bouncing melody is heard, giving way to the introspective feel at the beginning. I'd like to sample that brighter sound first. All right, I have no idea why I called that bouncing, but it is brighter than the beginning. I think you had to hear this from the beginning to get that idea. The movement ends in the gentle way that it began. It's a little more dramatic there at the middle. Track 10 is the third movement, Appassionato. It's a contrast to the other two movements. It starts quietly, but with a sense of urgency to the piano line. The cello responds lyrically again. Pizzetti keeps to song-like melodies, and that's what makes these three canti appealing. He also has a way with setting the timbral contrast between these two instruments very well. There's some mysterious moments in this piece, such as the approach to the end, followed by the sudden rush to the final chord. Let me sample a bit of that for you. Well, you really didn't hear that coming, did you? And that's the album. I heard this album more as an introduction to these three composers' cello works than as anything else. All of the works on it were unfamiliar to me, and all were immediately appealing. And though they had the requisite weight that works in these forms required, they didn't make excessive demands on the ear. There were plenty of beautiful lines with no sugary excess. Trainini has a beautiful sense of legato on the cello, and Pontoriero's piano playing suits the character of the works and comes up sounding full on the recording. It's good to hear the cello in full legato song-like form throughout the album. It's an album of works that will be worth taking the time to discover.
I enjoyed all of these compositions. My favorites were the Respighi and the Pizzetti, just because the melodies were just impossibly beautiful.
Yeah.
Trainini's cello tone is warm, but yet it's always really centered, and he sounds completely in control. When he gets up really high, it's pretty amazing. It's hard to believe it's still the cello. His phrasing and dynamics are really fabulous, too. And Pontoriero's piano playing was fabulous as well. Like you say, there's those rippling kind of fast parts, hard to control, and yet still keep the cello sounding great. And I found a lot of dynamic enthusiasm in some of the other accompanying parts, too. So I really love this recording.
Yeah, we're going to have to keep this in mind. I liked it a lot, too. Got to get a CD. Maybe Tactus could be the first classical label to ever send us a CD. We'll just say that.
Or two.
Or two. Yeah, definitely send two if you're going to send any. We both want this. Okay, next, the third album is by a contemporary composer, David Fontanesi, born 1969 in Volta Mantovana in Mantova, Lombardia, which is in central north Italy. A lot of people will know Mantova as the place where the Duke of Mantova in Verdi's opera Rigoletto is from. He's really a bad guy in the opera, but I'm sure Fontanesi is a great guy. Anyway, these are his 4-string quartets played by the Mark Rothko Ensemble, consisting of Carlo Lazzari on violin, Valentino Dentesani, also violin, Benjamin Bernstein, viola, and Mariana Sinagra on the cello. This is on the Da Vinci Classics label. We just heard from them just 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
When we did Jason Kaiser's episode. And we're back with Da Vinci Classics, and I think they're going to figure quite a bit because they've got some good recordings coming out. This was released on March 29th. By the way, the Da Vinci Classics label, I neglected to mention last time, is based in Osaka, Japan.
Yeah, not too far from here.
Not too far from where we are. I'm kind of surprised by that. I think they do Italian music, and they seem to have set themselves up as an Italian label, but they have an office in Osaka, and we'd like to thank Yumi Shimizu for sending us the booklets for this album so that we kind of know what David Fontanesi is all about and what these works are about, too.
Yeah, it's nice to get a prompt reply with polite service, which we're used to in Japan. If you write to most of these Italian record companies, you're lucky if you ever hear back. So
what the issue is you never hear back from the very big record labels like Warner Classics. They're too busy to respond to you. Anyway, I like these smaller labels a lot. They're eager to please. I like that. Anyway, in the booklet, these 4 quartets are compared to T.S. Eliot's set of poems called the 4 Quartets. In a rather complex analogy, completely created by the author of the notes, Chiara Bertoglio. Fontanesi, when he wrote these, had nothing to do with these works. This is just her comparison. Fontanesi himself holds a master in history of medieval philosophy at University of Padova. He studied composition first with Giorgio Colombo Taccani and Stefano Kinca, then with Azio Corghi at l'Accademia Musicale Chigiana in Siena, and Mauro Bonifacio at Accademia Romanini in Brescia. So there's Siena again. Fontanesi frequently conceives his works by groups of 4, and this happened before the quartets to his organ sonatas, concertos, which were for brass, strings, and percussion, to his other concertos for solo instruments, and more. He says, all revolves around the number 4, and it has been this way for some years. Its squareness contains an idea of solidity. The booklet tells us that Fontanesi's music and personality seem to embody the tensions of contemporaneity as concerns form, content, language, and style in musical terms. The booklet claims that Fontanesi's 4 quartets demonstrate how some aporias, which are irresolvable internal contradictions, we all know this from our Plato, do we not? Socrates caused aporia in his listeners. So the irresolvable internal contradictions of today's musical world can be overcome without ignoring them, and of how it is possible to find a way out with respect to the aphasia. This means loss of ability to understand or express speech caused by brain damage, or maybe cultural damage in this case. The aphasia, the loss of ability to understand, that characterizes so substantial a portion of today's compositions. You have to start by seeking the way out, Fontanesi believes. Fontanesi says his music looks to the past, when composers clearly knew what made formal and musical beauty, while trying to encompass the present. I have to say I like this approach. I like the idea behind it, and this made me want to hear these works. And I'm glad I did, too, because they were very rewarding, as it turned out. Okay, the first quartet, Quartet 1, is structured as a sonata. It's in 4 movements, which is very traditional. The first movement, Allegro, comes in on a single, warm, and even ancient-sounding chord, and has a bit of a folk song sound to it, mostly because of the droning harmony in the lower strings. The cellos stand out a lot in the bridge to the second theme, and we're going to have to get into this sound world right away, so let's sample the opening of the first quartet. always feel bad, like, coming out at the end of, because you've heard the theme pretty much repeated 4 times. Then you don't hear what he's going to do with it. We got an idea what it sounds like, but you really have to hear it to see how it all plays out. There's counterpoint between cellos and violins, something that happens frequently in these quartets. And at a minute and 30 seconds, we hear the similar sounding theme, which I'm guessing acts as the second theme in the sonata form. Vibrato is present, but rather minimal. At 2 minutes and 44 seconds, the viola steps out with the theme, and the theme is handed off individually. The overall sound is soothing, but I wouldn't go so far as saying it's relaxing. One of the violins gets the theme solo at 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and it's handed around again. At 4 minutes and 25 seconds, we get a clean repeat of the opening, so we're in a recapitulation. I like the 3 repeated chords that end the movement. Very satisfying. And I want to say something. The second theme sounded similar, or maybe even the same, as the first theme. And this was something that Haydn did in his early string quartets before they figured, the 2 themes in the 2 different keys, the tonic and dominant key, could be different themes. He used to set the same theme in the different key. And I think that Fontanesi is doing something like that here. There's a real relationship between the 2 themes. They're not very different from each other. In the second movement, Scherzo vivace is pizzicato and proceeds like a measured dance. It has a light lift to the rhythm, and the quartet changes suddenly to bowing their instruments, and we get a harmonized theme with contrapuntal elements. This caught my ear right away. I really enjoyed the opening of this, and I'd like to sample this as well. We go back to that wonderful pizzicato opening. Okay, the bowed strings, when they come back after that pizzicato break, expand on their themes, and so do the pizzicati when they come in a third time. It's like 2 themes continuing side by side, like we've got interplaced like panels with 2 different paintings on them, and they sort of continue one after the other. I enjoyed this movement's trajectory a lot. The third movement, marked Adagio, has warm, full harmony at the beginning, with the viola and violins playing contrapuntal melodies. The movement is sung in the high end by the first violin, and we clearly hear all of the counterpoint in the cello and viola lines below. I'm particularly impressed with how Fontanesi consistently gives the viola space to be heard in. Beguiling melodies unfold in this work, and at the 4 minutes and 20-second mark, we return to the opening themes with some high, plucked notes from one of the violins in the accompaniment. Mostly, this is thick, luscious harmony over attractively flowing melodies and a satisfying tonic at the end. Yes, Fontanesi provides satisfying tonics at the end of every movement. They sound and feel really solid. The fourth track is the fourth movement, Rondo. He's got an accent over the O, so Rondo. Allegro con moto. The Rondo theme uses various effects like pizzicati, sul ponticello bowing, and staccato high notes. There are all sorts of odd syncopated stops and starts in it. It's not necessarily easy to remember melodically, but timbrally, I doubt anything else in the movement could sound like this, although he does vary the timbre when the rondo comes back. Let's just hear the way we hear it the first time around. Now we go into the first episode after that rondo theme. The first episode is mostly bowed, and the second episode, after we hear the rondo again, features a rapid Siciliano rhythm played with the cello bouncing the bow off the string, making the rhythm dance-like. while the rest of the ensemble play contrapuntal, folk-like material. This is a highly attractive movement. After the rondo comes back, we hear the Siciliano rhythm again, this time bowed staccato, while the rest of the ensemble plays thickly layered themes above it. There's a prolonged cadence at the end, making me wonder if that tonic chord is actually coming. Don't worry, it does. Tracks 5 through 8 are Quartet 2. This is also a proper sonata, form quartet. The first movement is a theme and variations, marked allegretto. The theme for this set of variations is almost Mozartian in its lightly drifting melodic and rhythmic shape. It's tuneful and appealing. The first variation has a marked timbral contrast, featuring a single violin on the melody with chords played pizzicato, then fully bowed accompaniment from the ensemble. The second variation has independent lines overlapping and handing off the theme to each other. The third variation has the theme in triplets with pizzicati chords beneath. It's brief, and the fourth variation comes with a softer, gauzier sound, featuring the cello playing a melody as the upper strings play wavering lines above. The fifth variation starts as a slow melody, and the other voices come in canon, at least with the theme. I really hope I'm counting these variations correctly. It sounds like the themes in the fifth variation go their own separate ways and snap back together to accompany the violin in the sixth variation. For the sixth variation, the violins take the lead, and the texture is complex, with many lines moving in different directions. This is a movement that has a lot of inventive melodizing in it, and is well worth hearing all the way through. Track 6, the second movement, Scherzo vivace assai. The scherzo starts quickly after the last theme ends and features pizzicati accompanying staccato lines in the melody. The scherzo is true to its name and is rather humorous, especially in the cello shaping of its melody at about the 1 minute 15 second mark, so about 15 seconds into this sample. Another appealing melody comes after that. After that humorous middle section, we hear the opening A section again. It's a brief but charming movement. Track 7, third movement, Andante Mesto, has a flowing sound but darker harmonies at the beginning. I'll sample this one. There's a pleading quality to the shaping of the melodies. Toward the end, the violin line becomes more impassioned, and the bottom harmonies press on with more urgency as well. We end on a passionately taken final chord. Track 8 is a fugue, and is marked allegro, and it has a total change of mood, with chirpy lines entering in fugal fashion. Let's hear that. So we're getting those little resting points, but the music just keeps going on. All of the movements in this sonata are relatively short and to the point, yet they make their points fully. The movement remains cheerful until the end and even builds to a cheerful, semi-grand, warm ending chord. Track 9 is a single movement quartet, Quartet 3, marked moderato. It's a kind of chaconne constructed on a descending tetrachord, C, B flat, A flat, G, and that a tetrachord sort of gives you ways to depart into other modes and things like that. I don't really understand the composition practice behind it, but they used it in the Renaissance a lot. It starts in the cello with a chromatic downward line, which is a signifier for death in classical era music. This work does have a mournful character to it, and the opening theme is reminiscent of a Renaissance viol work. The upper voices become busier and more ornamental as the chromatic chaconne theme is heard underneath. The individual variations are sharply delineated in this work and generally don't meld into each other, though on occasion they do, for contrast on contrast. Fontanesi is a composer that seems to like contrast as an expressive feature in his music. Well, I guess a lot of them do, but it's really marked here. The chaconne theme appears in all of the voices in the quartet at certain periods, with the other voices all getting a chance to have their say on it. There are, of course, pizzicato sections. This 14-minute work shows a lot of timbral creativity. There are so many ear-catching delights, and the main pleasure of hearing it is how surprisingly they come upon you. At 7 minutes and 15 seconds, I rather liked the pizzicati playing with a high harmonic in one of the violins, which suddenly changes to something else. So I'm going to sample that part really quickly. Yeah, now you might have noticed that this work has come out of its funereal opening that I described earlier. I didn't sample that, but it is a 14-minute work, and it really does go through a lot of moods. There's some interesting timbres also at the 11-minute and 45-second mark, and I'm going to play that for you too, because I thought this was very inventive as well. And I like the way, just like nothing, he'll just come out of that with the bowed lines, like it didn't happen. I could sample a lot more in this work, really. It's all impressive in context, and I urge you to hear the entire work. It comes across as kaleidoscopic, and once again ends on a deeply satisfying tonic. Quartet 4 looks back to the form of a church sonata of the 17th century. So very brief movements here. The polka adagio has a bit of a humpy rhythm, and brief lines put together. Let's sample that. This is the opening of Quartet 4. Cadence snuck up on me again. Anyway, that line returns quite a bit and becomes haunting with repetition. This seems to have an ABA feel to it, despite the fact that it's described as a church sonata. In the 17th century, this form was in its early stages. Track 11, the second movement, contrapuntal. It's marked allegro. The theme sounds like it starts in the viola and has a twisting quality to it. Let's hear it. The voices come together at times, but often start up again in fugal fashion. Textures thicken and thin, but that twisting quality remains. Track 12, Andante, is a barcarolle. It's gentle, with the bass played on the 1, 3, and 4 of the 6/8 time signature, to give that gondola floating on the wavelets feel. The violins are suitably song-like and sound like a sung duet, as said here, satisfying full tonic chord at the end. And track 13, Vivace, is a perpetuum mobile presented by the cello in the form of a rondo. You really need to listen to the cello to get the perpetuum mobile. He plays eighth notes throughout, while the upper strings harmonize in thematic material. There's a rising harmony quality to the first departure. In fact, the rondo theme is a rather nondescript, while the departures are all the more interesting elements to my ear. It's an interesting reversal to the usual approach. So the works on this album have a heavy traditional feel to them, even though they often use more modern timbral effects produced by bowing. The harmony used in these works is traditional, and the approach evokes the past, though these works are creative and unfold in a unique way. Fontanesi has an ear for attractive melodies, and these lead us through these thoroughly unpretentious and highly enjoyable works. I always have to mention that doesn't mean that these works are mere entertainment. They've all got content and a bit of weight to them as well. This could be because Fontanesi draws heavily from the past in the writing of his individual lines. He's a composer who very well may have something to communicate musically that will interest modern audiences, and I'd urge listeners to try this out.
Yeah, I felt much the same way. Fontanesi's music is built of elements, seems to go back to Baroque or maybe earlier, right through to the Romantic period, so it all sounds familiar and comfortable. It's like what's old is new again or used in new ways, but ideas and styles flow seamlessly into each other, serving the expression rather than a certain technique or style. The melody lines are pleasing, and the arranging for the quartet has each instrument doing interesting things to follow. There are a lot of contrasts in tempos and modalities. The recording has a lot of detail. Sometimes the violins sound a bit edgy, but all the parts are heard with great clarity, and I found all the compositions interesting and satisfying.
Yeah, so I want to say we've only done 2 releases from Da Vinci Classics, and it sounds like the label is onto something. We've heard 2 very interesting releases. The other was the Giannone Guitar Works with Jason Kaiser as guest host. And both recordings were top class, as were the performances. And we're going to hear another one next week, and I'm looking forward to hearing future releases on this label. We'll be hearing one more next week.
Yeah, they're picking out some interesting music to feature, so
yeah,
it's a good start with this label. All right, over on the jazz side, we're going to continue with an all-Italian program. We're going to start out with a young guitarist, Gianmarco Ferri, and his new recording, On the Scene. This is on GleAM Records. It came out April 19th. So guitarist and composer Gianmarco Ferri was born in Campobasso in 1999. He started musical studies at the age of 13. In 2015, he participated in the summer seminars of Umbria Jazz, where he won a 5-week scholarship to the Berklee College of Music in Boston. And in the course of those 5 weeks, following an audition, he won a scholarship that allowed him to attend a full degree program there. In 2022, he graduated with a degree in contemporary performance, and after earning his degree, he went to Rome and began activity as a professional musician. On this recording, Gianmarco Ferri on the electric guitar, Stefano Battaglia on bass, Luca Santoniello on drums, and Dave Kikoski on piano.
Wow, big surprise.
Yeah, big surprise. And we've also got a guest on tenor sax on one tune, Marcello Aluli, on track 4. This was recorded, mixed, and mastered at Recording Studio La Strada in Rome. Sound engineer Enrico Furzi. Recording starts out with a tune called Kiko's Delight. This is a Ferri original composition based on the harmony of Tad Dameron's Tad's Delight. It's a 32-measured tune with 2 similar halves, but with a different ending. And Ferri and Kikoski take the boppy melody in unison, and Kikoski is off on his first piano solo. Let's hear the recording get started. We'll hear some more from Dave Kikoski soon, but let's check out Ferri's solo on this tune so we can get a sense of his style. Melodic and mature with nice spaces between phrases, Battaglia and Santaniello get to trade fours on bass and drums for a round before everyone is back for another run through the melody. Track 2 is called New Hope, another Ferri original based on the groove of the famous song Poinciana by Nat Simone, for which Ahmad Jamal had a very famous version, and we just heard this tune in episode 161 on David Schumacher's Smoke in the Sky. Here, it's a happy-sounding tune with syncopated starting phrases that push it forward. It's in an AABA form with 16-measure sections. The B section contrasts with more busyness, and the final A section is extended to 20 measures. Ferri takes the first A section, and Kikoski doubles with him on the repeats. Let's hear this one get going. Back to the A section there, and then Ferri gets a solo with a nice sense of playfulness. His tone is interesting. It's clear, but not too thick. Let's hear some of Kikoski's solo on this tune when he gets his chance. And back to the melody from there to wrap up the tune. Track 3, another Ferri original, Mirage. It's a blues in D with a 12/8 groove. It's a 12-bar blues. Some interesting chord changes, though, especially from the 9th measure. There's not much melody, but it builds up with a cool bass riff and piano chords, adding in guitar as it keeps going around. Ferri gets started soloing. It's bluesy and funky, but there's a cool change-up to a groove with a chugging, walking bass. So let's check out some of that transition once his solo gets going. Yeah, tasty and bluesy. Things thin and chill out back to the original feel for Kikoski's piano solo, which then gets chugging along after a while too. So let's pop back in for a little bit of that. For a couple of rounds. Boy, Kikoski always does some dynamite stuff.
Yeah, he really adds a lot to like every track he's on, especially on this album. It seems like he really just step out quite a bit. It's just fantastic.
Track 4, another Ferri original, So Close. This one's a ballad with a lush rubato solo piano intro from Dave Kikoski for more than a minute. Marcella Aluli joins in on tenor sax for this track. It's a pretty melody, AABA form with an extended final section. Sax takes the A sections and Ferri the B sections on guitar. Let's hear some of the melody once it gets going. To the B section there. After the final sax A section, Kikoski improvises on the A sections, Aluli on the B, and Ferri is back for the final A melody section. It's restrained and lovely playing throughout. Track 5, Unit 7. This is composed by the famous bassist Sam Jones and Ferri's tribute to guitarist Wes Montgomery. You can hear this on 1962's Down Home Sam Jones and Company, and also on the 1962 recording Nancy Wilson and Cannonball Adderley. Ferri gets the cool opening riff going that everyone joins in on to make an intro out of. The melody is a 12-bar blues shape around twice, a break into a lighter Latin-y bridge, and once more around the blues, all handled by Ferri. Let's hear it get going. After another 12-bar blues round, Ferri continues on into a solo, and Kikoski gets one as well. The solos follow the blues pattern, and Battaglia gets a bass solo on this tune, so let's check that out before we move on. bouncy bass solo, back to the melody there, and a riffy outro from there to finish it. The recording's going to wrap up with a couple of standards. Track 6, They Say It's Wonderful, Irving Berlin, from the musical Annie Get Your Gun, 1946. This is often done as a slow ballad, but here they give it a slightly relaxed medium tempo. Kokoski starts with a solo piano intro, and Ferri takes the melody. Let's hear some of it. Let's come back in a little bit after the solo break to hear some of Ferri's solo ideas on this tune. Use some of the melody, mix in some double stops and nice phrasing. Kokoski's solo on this one shows a light touch and playful high register ideas. It's really great. And Ferri takes it through the melody and wraps it up with some strummed chords. And the recording finishes up with The Song Is You, Jerome Kern, Oscar Hammerstein. It was written for their musical Music in the Air, 1932. Ferri gets this guitar and piano duet going, and it's a lot of fun. For this famous standard, let's just hear it get going. Ferri's solo on this tune is melodic and rhythmically exciting, and Kokoski has a great solo too, but let's check out their exchanges when Ferri comes back in. And then we go back to the melody to finish up the album. Well, he's just 25 years old, but Gianmarco Ferri has already developed a mature musical style with melodic improvised ideas and great phrasing. His guitar tone is unique. It's not very large or sustained, but it's always clear, and he likes to leave space, which is always a good thing. The material here is familiar, standards, a Sam Jones tune, and Ferri's post-bop-inspired originals. Kikoski's playing is great as always, and Battaglia and Santaniello sound tight and spirited. Actually, everything on this recording sounds high-spirited and fun, like they were having a great time, and you will too if you give this one a listen.
Yeah, really. You want to give a lot of space when you're playing with Dave Kikoski. I have to say, he really hangs in there with this really veteran pianist. He sounds fantastic. Ferri is an appealing guitarist with a very attractive tone, like you said, and attractive ideas as well. So he has that in common with Kikoski as well. He has a very clean attack and fits into the grooves on this album perfectly. Kikoski, well, we know he has nonstop ideas, and along with Ferri, keeps the album mostly lively, with traditional late-night ballads like So Close capturing the right mood. There's a bit of variety to the instrumentation. We hear a sax solo in So Close. This is a straightforward, swinging, and cheerful jazz album for the most part, with one ballad to break up the faster tempos. Anyone who hears it should like it. It's really appealing. I liked it a lot. Really fresh sounding.
Yeah, fresh and positive energy. Check it out. Next recording, get some sax in the mix here with the Lorenzo Bisogno Quartet. Actually, it's mainly a quintet. It's called It's a New Day on Emme Records. Came out April 30th. Lorenzo Bisogno is around 31 years old. He's from Bastia Umbra. He graduated with honors from the Conservatory of Music in Perugia. He's got a master's degree in jazz studies from Queens College, New York. Previously, with his quartet, he released Open Spaces in 2022, also on the Emme record label. On this recording, Lorenzo Bisogno, tenor sax, Manuel Magrini on piano, Pietro Pari on bass, Lorenzo Brighi on drums, and Cosimo Boni on trumpet. The recording is going to start out with the Bisogno original composition, It's a New Day, the title track. Syncopated bass and piano chords make an 8-measure intro, cymbals dance in, and the drums get a straight rock-like beat going. The horns come in mirroring the chords below with melody lines. It's a simple figure that modulates and comes back in 8-measure sections. There's a busier 16-measure section and then a return to the original figures for a total of 48 measures. Let's hear this get going. Magrini will be up first for piano solo with a combination of syncopated rhythmic ideas and some smoother lines, but let's jump back in and hear some of our leader here with a sax solo from Bisogno. Nice smooth phrasing and getting more animated as he builds it up. Boni follows on trumpet with a nice rhythmic snap in his lines and some double-time phrases and high reaches. It's back to the melody sections after that, but this time it ends suddenly on the more animated section with some accented horn hits. Track 3 is called Embers, and this is an original from Pietro Paris. This has really tricky syncopated unison horn figures that started out, and the bass and drum switch-ups underneath are pretty cool. It sounds like a 12-measure phrase that's repeated, and then a final 4 measures of the opening horn phrase before a piano interlude into a solo from Bisogno. Let's hear it get going. After the sax solo, there's another piano interlude, and then Boni gets a trumpet solo, so let's check out what he plays on this tune. Piano interlude there leads to the melody phrase one time and the opening figure again that pushes into some slowed down final chords. Track 3, another Bisogno composition. It's an old day. A waltz meter here with arpeggiated piano making an intro for Boni to take the melody. Interesting chord changes underneath, and it seems to be 32 measures with a pause before a final 4-measure tag phrase. Bass comes in with some pulses, and then drum brushes set up another round with Bisogno joining in unison, and then some phrase exchanges and interplay. Let's check it out from where the sax joins in after just about a minute. Magrini has a gentle piano solo over nice pulsing bass work from Paris, and Bisogno's back with a final time through the melody, joined midway by Boni's trumpet, and they add repeats of the final tag section, ending it in a lovely gentle way. It's a very pretty tune. Track 4, a Bisogno original, Red Circles, a tricky angular unison horn melody on this one that gets started after a 10-measure intro of walking bass and drums. There's a repeating 8-measure A-type section, then a 16-measure contrasting B section that modulates midway. It's back to the A section, but it sounds like it's extended to 10 measures. Let's hear it get going. Bisogno's off on a solo from there, over bass and drums, with piano joining in once it gets chugging along. Some nice smooth and fluttery phrases on his sax. Boni has an agile trumpet solo too, exploring some interesting ideas through the harmonies. And Magrini gets a piano solo too, with punchy chords accenting his lines. Once more through the melody with some extra improvisations from Bisogno, finishes it up. Track 5, another Bisogno original, Trying to Remember. This tune has an interesting groove and meter. I don't know how it's written, but it sounds like measures of 4, 3, 4, and 4, or 7 beats, then 8 beats. Let's pick it up about 30 seconds in before the horn melody and check out the cool bass and piano fills and the beat mix-ups in the drums underneath. Starts to get dreamier, and the pulse subsides a bit there. Bisogno and Boni trade solo phrases on this one. Let's hear a little bit of their interaction. Magrini has a piano solo as well before the horns are back with the melody. Track 6 is a Boni original, No Thing, that's K-N-O-W. This is a short rubato tune with composed unison horn lines over drum fills and rippling piano. Midway through, Magrini's piano takes over and the drums simmer down for a while before the horns return and split off with more drum excitement and final dancing cymbals. Track 7 is a Magrini original, Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. It's a really cool tune in a 3-beat meter. It starts with an awesome bass ostinato with a ringing low note and then descending figures from way up high. The lazy descending horn lines are contrasted by the jittery piano figures below. The structure seems to be AA-BA form with 16 measure sections, but the final A is only 8 measures. Let's hear it get going. When it gets to the B section, it gets a mood change with a major and happy shift. Magrini has a bouncy piano transition to solo exchanges between Boni and Bisogno and really pounds out the piano chords. They get back to the melody with a quiet outro of soft horns and piano over the bass ostinato. I thought it was a really cool tune. Track 8 is called Maybe Not, and this is described as something built on a harmonic pattern by Wayne Shorter. This has staccato rhythmic machine-like horn lines over the pattern with a sparse drum beat. The horns get into some more improvisations before it comes to a chilled ending with bass and piano fading out. Track 9 is called Grego, and this is by Pietro Pari. A lush rubato piano intro to this ballad. Boni starts the melody with a harmon-muted trumpet, and Bisogno comes in for an 8-measure interlude, and Boni's back to finish it. It has an extra measure that extends it to 33 measures. It's very pretty. Let's check it out at the beginning. Ferri will take a bass solo on his own composition here, so let's hear a little of his improvisations before we leave. Bisogno follows with a solo, nice sensitive legato phrasing. It picks up a double time feel and a sense of motion, and he has some nice fluttery trills on this one. Boni joins back in for the final sections of the melody in unison to wrap up the tune. And the recording ends up with track 10, That Was for Albert, which is also described as being built on a harmonic pattern by Wayne Shorter. The two horns get it started with nice interplay and get joined by the rhythm section midway through on this short piece. Let's hear it from that point for a little bit. And the chords will cycle on to a faded ending. And by the way, that chord cycle is longer, but the first three chords sound like the first three chords we hear opening the album up, and then it's a little different pattern, but I just noticed that. Anyway, it's an excellent recording of contemporary jazz with fresh original compositions by Bisogno and the other members. There's a lot of variety of structures and rhythmic feels. The level of musicianship is high, and the solos have an exploratory quality. Bisogno isn't a show-off sax player. His solos are well-crafted and take musical directions. And Boni has good range and agility, and his trumpet solos take some harmonic chances. The rhythm section is tight and responsive to subtle changes in the compositions and changes in the solos, and I enjoyed this recording a lot.
Yeah, I really appreciated the craft of Bisogno's playing as well. This album, it came across to me as like, it's complex, but the complexity is really subtle, like you said, I guess, in the craft. So on the surface, it has like a traditional jazz approach with swinging rhythms in the mix, and some pretty complicated harmonies too. And there's a lot of contrast between each of the soloists. They're an interesting grouping. The various parts often show a lot of contrast, like track 6, where we get rushing complex figures. I'm using this word a lot. From the piano and drums as the brass play like steady, straightforward themes. The trumpeter is the more adventurous player of the soloists on the album, going off into his high range and always taking a lively rhythmic approach to his solos. A lot of the soloing leaves quite a bit of space. The spareness of the solos becomes sort of the sound of the album. It comes across as a bit moody as a result. There are swinging tracks, but they stick close to mid-tempo. I thought this was a good late-night listen, and it kind of had me thinking a lot, you know, just trying to kind of puzzle through these sort of complex things. It was like activating my brain. The musicians do a lot with little in many cases, and I thought their ideas were appealing. I think this is, again, going to be a recording that's going to repay like repeated listenings. There's really a lot to listen for.
Yeah, interesting compositions.
Yeah.
All right, and our final recording, harp. Mike, we're going to hear some more harp tonight.
Not only that, we're going to hear like an electric harp, which is very cool. Now, the sound we hear on this record reminds me of, there was a record by the Italian composer Ludovico Einaudi, of his music by the harpist Cecilia Sciai, and she played a similar instrument, so this sound had me thinking of that. So it has this long sustain. It's really great. I really like that.
We're talking about the Marcella Carboni Trio. The recording Miradas on Giotto Music came out May 3rd, and this is featuring the music of Enrico Pieranunzi, one of our favorite pianists. Yeah. So Carboni graduated in classical harp with an additional academic degree in jazz and the study of traditional composition. She's worked with European jazz musicians such as Bruno Tommaso, Rosario Giuliani, and Enrico Intra, as well as Enrico Pieranunzi, who has given her some of his compositions to play. She's also played with Anthony Braxton's Sonic Genome. From the notes to the recording, quote, "Since the 1970s, Italian jazz in the world has had an ambassador of excellence, Enrico Pieranunzi. Marcella Carboni, with her electroacoustic harp, wants to pay homage to contemporary Italian jazz by reinterpreting the music of Enrico Pieranunzi. For this special project, one of the greatest interpreters of Pieranunzi's music was involved, the virtuoso and poetic clarinetist Gabriele Mirabassi, who enriches Marcella's Carboni's trio, an atypical jazz trio which sees a harp instead of the piano or the guitar. Marcella Carboni, with her electroacoustic harp, calls two pillars of Italian jazz to her side, Paolino Dalla Porta on double bass and Stefano Bagnoli on drums, a trio that puts the harp in a position to go beyond the stereotypes linked to its instrument. So we've got Marcella Carboni on her electroacoustic harp, which looks, as far as I can tell, like a regular acoustic harp, but it has piezo pickups at the base of each string, and some of them also contain a separate microphone inside the sound box, so you can mix the signals from both types of pickups. I don't know what we've got on her instrument, but often these instruments also may have a preamp on board the instrument. Gabriele Mirabassi on clarinet, who we heard with Enrico Pieranunzi back in episode 152 on the recording Traveler's Ways. Paolino Dalla Porta on bass and Stefano Bagnoli on drums. The recording is going to start out with one of Pieranunzi's compositions, Les Amants. This is from an album of the same title in 2004. A pretty minor waltzing melody exchanged between harp and clarinet. It seems to be like an AAB 33 measure construction, but let's take a listen. Dalla Porta is off from there on a deep-toned bass solo. There's a modulation and harp solo next, so let's hear some of this engaging harp tone from Carboni. Another modulation there for Mirabasi's clarinet solo, and then he'll take it back to the melody to finish out the tune. Track 2, the title track, Miradas, this is from the recording Special Encounter that Piero Nunzi made with Charlie Hayden and Paul Motion, 2005. Another gorgeous minor melody. Dalla Porta takes lead on the 32-measure tune first, so let's hear some of that. Carboni has a round of the melody next, continuing on to an improvised solo, and then Dalla Porta is back for a bass solo, before some final pretty harp treatment of the melody with some bendy bass and harmonics at the end. Now I should mention, I looked up these compositions from Piero Nunzi to find out what recordings they were on, but he's written a lot of songs. Some of them have been recorded multiple times, and I'm not sure I'm getting the original version. I'm just putting them out there in case you want to look them up. I did write to Giatti Music, but of course I didn't get a reply. I wanted to see the full album notes to see if there was any more information on the rest of the compositions. Now here we're going to get our first sguardi, which I guess is like a glimpse in Italian.
Yeah, it's just more like a gazing at something. It's like your eyes soften and you're just kind of looking at something for a long time. Sguardo.
Sguardi 1.
It could be staring at someone too, so it could be either, really.
This is the first one, and looking at the YouTube credits, these are credited to the whole group, so these seem to be probably somewhat spontaneous compositions with a lot of improvisation around an idea. And this one is built around rising clarinet lines and some interesting plucked harp chords. Let's hear it get going. Interaction is interesting with the plodding bass lines and the even drumming. It builds up tension and quiets down at the end to final clarinet figures.
I want to say, by the way, sguardo, I think your definition is probably better. It's like a quick look, at something. It could be a lot of things depending on the context, though.
Track 4 is Fellini's Waltz. This is from a recording Fellini Jazz in 2003, also with Charlie Hayden and Paul Motion, but adding in Chris Potter on sax and Kenny Wheeler on trumpet. It's another great melody from Piernunzi here, played by Miradas. It's 64 measures, not the same pattern around twice because the chord changes have some surprises in the second half of the melody. Let's sample Miradas' fluttery and fluid clarinet solo on this tune. Carboni solos next, with harmonized lines there to start out into some dense rhythmic chords, and Miradas is back for some more playful improvisations over some animated drums from Magnoli before a return to the melody. It has an extended coda ending with some surprises. Track 5, Permutation. This is from a 2012 album of the same name that Piernunzi recorded with Scott Coley and Antonio Sanchez. This is built around an ostinato by Dalla Porta. Magnoli gets dancing cymbals going and adds some hits and kicks. Carboni's harp lines sound muted and mysterious with lots of space between phrases, creating anticipation. Let's check it out. Changes up there, getting busier, and the bass ostinato changes up, and Carboni has some interesting meandering, plucking improvisations that the bass joins in step with. Carboni picks up the ostinato on the harp for Dalla Porta to take over the melody lines on bass, and Magnoli gets to work out around the drum kit over rhythmic vamping to the end of the tune. Track 6, Sguardi 2. This is just over a minute or so on solo clarinet from Miradas, who gets some eerie-sounding harmonics that sound like two instruments playing at the same time. Check it out, it's pretty interesting. Track 7, Canto Nascosto. This is from the 2000 album of the same name, and it's also on the previously mentioned 2004 Les Amants. This has a haunting melody taken together by harp and clarinet. The phrasing is interesting, alternating between 3 and 5 beats over long bass notes. There's no drums, and if I'm not mistaken, no bass either other than the low harp bass. We should sample the magical interaction on Miradas' improvised solo on this one from just before 2 minutes in. back to the melody from there. Really beautiful playing. Track 8 is Sguardi 3. This one is contemplative with searching clarinet phrases, answering lines from the bass, and sometimes tense chords from the harp. It starts rubato but gets some agitation after 2 minutes and develops into a pulsing rhythm. Track 9, Remoti Mattini Mediterranei. I guess that means remote Mediterranean mornings.
Yeah, that's about it.
And if you go to Piranunzi's website, he has a list of all of his compositions, and this is listed under his chamber music compositions with a date of 2001. It started solo on the harp, and this will give you a good sense of the full range of the instrument. So let's hear the tune get going. Towards the middle of the composition, Carboni is working deep in the bass range of the instrument, and then bass and drums join in after about 3 minutes to the rich and dreamy ending. Track 10, La Heure Oblique. This is from 1996's Seaward recording, and this has a real Spanish music kind of evocation with the harmonies and scales that get this atmospheric tune started. It's mysterious. Dalla Porta gets a great melodic bass solo on this one too, but let's sample Carboni's harp solo here because it gets that Spanish feel and incorporates most of what makes this tune really sound unique. After the harp solo, we get another time through the melody, and Bagnoli gets to do some drum work on a vamping section to the end. Track 11 is Sguardi 4, a more improvisatory piece. Bagnoli's cymbals give this one some drive right from the start, and Dalla Porta gets a raging walking bass going under Mirabasi's searching clarinet improvisations. Carboni plays thick and jarring chords, sometimes strummed. It's spontaneous, and you don't know where it will end up. Track 12, Just a Song. This is from My Songbook, a Piranunzi recording that came out in 2016. Carboni's harp has a music box quality getting this one started, and Mirabasi comes in on the slow theme over just ringing bass. Let's hear it get started. Bagnoli joins in on brushes, giving it a slow, steady tempo. And Dalla Porta's bass solo on this tune really sings, so let's take a listen to a little bit of that as well. He starts his solo there, getting way up high. Carboni has a ringing solo too, with Miradas providing some legato backing lines. The clarinet melody is back to a final harp section like the opening, with the last line from Miradas. The recording ends with a tune called Silence, and this is from Charlie Hayden's Silence from 1989. It had Piero Nunzi, Billy Higgins, and Chet Baker. If you know the original from Hayden's recording, it starts out with piano chords that Piero Nunzi plays, and Chet Baker adds soft melody notes over that, with Hayden joining in on bass below. Here, Carboni plays those chords. They're high and ringing, sounding slightly muted. It's only 38 seconds, and then the recording's finished. We've been admirers of Enrico Piero Nunzi's piano playing for a while, and along the way enjoyed his compositions. Here we get to experience them in a new way with this gorgeous combination of tones from Carboni's harp and Mirabasi's clarinet. Piero Nunzi's melodies are mostly things of beauty, so the more spontaneous, squarty pieces break things up and keep the program from putting you into a kind of dreamland. Mirabasi's fluid clarinet impresses just like the last time we heard him. Dalla Porta and Bagnoli keep things tight and exciting, nice ringing melodic bass solos too. And overall, Carboni shows what the harp is capable of. Angelic strums, of course, but she can also get piano and guitar-like styles, edgy, dense, plucked chords, harmonized melodic lines with independent bass, and creative solos. This was an entertaining and satisfying listen.
Yeah, I was happy to be in that daydreamy space. That was fantastic. This is a beautiful album. And it's really more impressionistic sounding than jazzy, given the instruments. But that said, it's a jazz album, full of solos in the expected places. The music is mostly gentle and breezy, but the softer timbres of the instruments used soften the harshness of the harmony in compositions like Permutation. The harp is electric and sounds bright throughout, notes sustaining for long periods of time. It's a sound I really love, and the bass really registers. It just rings for a really long time. There was a bass solo, and the harp was kind of providing this even deeper like bass while the bassist was soloing. It was a really nice sound overall. The clarinet can be both fluty and dark, and it communicates both qualities on various tracks. The playing is very versatile. This album is appealing all the way through, and I imagine I'll be listening to it for its gentle, positive vibe. The word gentle just keeps coming up for me on this. The arrangements have a French pastel sound to them. This is recommended for its overall sound and for its just really gentle vibe.
Yeah. Great sound, this harp and clarinet combination.
It can provide a safe space, I guess.
Yeah. A safe space from the Italian explosion that this episode was. What a bunch of good music, yeah.
Yeah, and that we're going to have to spend another hour or two cleaning up after.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm glad we don't do this often. I would like to, but
yeah. Well, with all the Italian music that's come out, we could have a few more episodes and not run out of things. But
we'll have to hire a cleaning staff for these episodes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, what do we have on the menu for next week's episode, Mike?
Oh, what do we have? We have more Mozart, because I had 2 Mozart albums come out, and, the Strauss one, right? Mozart and Strauss. And now I've got a full all-Mozart, like, opera aria one by Golda Schultz, the South African soprano who's really becoming quite a sensation. I've wanted to hear her. She had an album last year that I didn't get to on the podcast. I had it like on my list, and we never just got to do it. So I'm going to do her this year. We have music by the composer Louise Farin that's going to be on the Da Vinci Classics label again. This will be chamber music and smaller ensembles, clarinet trio, flute trio, and some piano music too. And then we have Contemporary Composer of the Week next week, the American Christopher Alan Schmitz, his Violin Concerto and Symphony No. 1. I know nothing about him. I'm going to find out this week, and I'll report back to you next week about that.
Great. On the jazz side, we're going to check out a new recording on Cello Live by Thai trumpeter Win Pongsakorn.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to this, too, because I'm a rather big fan of Thai culture, and I'm really curious to hear what they're going to sound like here.
That'll be interesting. We're going to go over to Fresh Sound New Talent label for a Spanish flautist, Fernando Brox, with a recording called From Within. And then one that we've been waiting for, Kenny Barron's new Beyond This Place, that has Emmanuel Wilkins and Jonathan Blake on it. I've been checking it out a little bit this week, and it sounds good so far, so we'll get a little bit deeper into that and report back on that in our next episode.
Yeah.
And that's going to wrap it up for episode 164. As always, thanks to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. Remember to check out the Same Difference 2 Jazz Fans 1 Jazz Standard podcast, and their audio promo will be coming up at the end of this episode. Any final words, Mike?
Yes, I'd just like to say that all of the mouth breathing on this episode was my own. But I feel like I've cleared up a bit here. I feel a little better now.
Hopefully your congestion will be cleared up for next week. If you want to check out these recordings while we're listening to them, get started listening early, a few hours after this episode goes up. We'll have this playlist up on Deezer. There'll also be a link to it from our Facebook page. So looking forward to these new recordings for next week. And we'll see you again for episode 165. Until then, keep listening, and we'll see you again next time.
Same Difference. 2 Jazz Fans, 1 Jazz Standard. A review of a single jazz standard through music, history, and stories. And this is AJ.
And this is Johnny.
If you are a jazz fan and you like jazz standards, bebop, show tunes, ballads, you name it.
Yeah, we've got them here. We drop a new show on you every other week, and we take a standard and we listen to a few different versions of it.
Same Difference.
Come join the fun.
Looking forward to seeing you.